NHL, extra little bit of swag, an extra little bit of taste.
Yeah. Man, I'm headed to the field. Terror of the tiger, I'ma always keep it real. Everything gon' get devoured, it's the power. LSU with Carter, it's the power. LSU with Carter, man, I'm headed to the field. Terror of the tiger, I'ma always keep it real. Everything gon' get devoured, it's the power. LSU with Carter, it's the power. LSU with Carter, man.
Are you kidding me? LSU, could they be getting another 5-star in Jonah Williams? We'll talk about that coming up. And here in just a moment, we will have our guest, a first-time USC expert to ever join PHL, and you are going to love him. Now, one of the juiciest stories of the offseason was Lincoln Riley and USC trying to back out of the LSU game. Now, what's interesting about that is there was only one reporter who really reported this. It was Matt Hayes, and Matt has been a college football reporter for a very long time. I thought that was kind of interesting. No one really, I believe at the time, followed up and said, hey, this is a thing or it's not. And I want to first off shout out a very brave young reporter by the name of Luca Evans. He decided to get in Lincoln Riley's face today. That's a little aggressive, but he did ask Lincoln Riley this at the Big Ten Media Days, and this is what Lincoln Riley had to say about that.
On scheduling, I think there was a report that you guys were looking to maybe shift the LSU game. Was that accurate or not?
No, we never looked at shifting it. It was far enough down the line that I don't think that was ever realistic from either side. I think both sides took a look at it because obviously they had changes in their conference, just like we did, that weren't the same when we scheduled the game. And obviously the playoff system was different. I mean, everything was different. So, we've tried to look at every game that we can in the future. LSU, certain LSU, the reference to Ole Miss, every non-conference game that we've played, we've looked at and said, all right, do these make sense given what else we know that we're playing, and just trying to set the best schedule for it that we can.
On scheduling, I think.
Okay. I got to be real. It kind of sounded like he contradicted himself. Now, I do commend Luca for asking the question, but it wasn't well asked, and there wasn't a direct follow-up. He should have said, hey, did you try to cancel the LSU game? And Lincoln Riley at first said, no, we did not try to shift. That was the question. Did you try to shift the LSU game? All right, which can mean a lot of different things. And he said, no, I didn't. But then he followed up and said, well, there was a lot of things that changed for both teams, and we evaluate every single out-of-conference game that we schedule. It is an ambiguous question. And then during that same answer, he said, well, I'm sure LSU reevaluated things. You don't know that. You don't know what goes into LSU's minds as far as scheduling is concerned, unless he does actually know that on the LSU side of things that they were trying to get out of the USC game. Now, we can have a debate over should LSU have tried to get out of the USC game, because obviously LSU has not been that great in season openers, and USC is a very formidable opponent, but that's a different story for a different day. So I would have loved to follow up. I've looked for other Lincoln Riley answers to this question. There's not many of them. I felt like this was not truly answered clearly, but he did at the beginning. I will play it for you again. Maybe I'm tripping here. Okay.
There was a report that you guys were looking to maybe shift the LSU game. Was that accurate or not?
No,
accurate?
no, we never looked at shifting it. It was far enough down the line that I don't think that was ever realistic from either side. I think both sides took a look at it because obviously they had changes in their conference, just like we did that weren't realistic from either side. I think both sides took a look at it because
He said he thinks both sides took a look at it. Very strange. Very, very, very strange. Um, y- unless he knows. Unless he knows. And maybe he does know. Maybe he does. Obviously, what is it? Does Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly share the same agent? I don't know. I really don't know. But Lincoln Riley just said, hey, that report wasn't right. He said, no, it was far enough down the line. Or maybe he is confirming the report. Once again, it's kind of ambiguous there. Is he saying, no, we didn't look to shift it because it was too late down the road for us to shift it? So maybe he is just saying, yes, the report is true. We tried to do it, but it was too late for us to shift it. I don't know. It wasn't the cleanest question and answer, but I do commend the young man for doing it. Either way, this is a huge game for Lincoln Riley. Huge game. And obviously UCLA, their defensive coordinator came over, DeAnton Lynn, who was really good last year, had a few of his players get drafted. And now we're going to see what Lincoln Riley looks like without Alex Grinch as his defensive coordinator, who a lot of experts believe Lynn is going to make this USC defense formidable, and that Alex Grinch was the one holding him back. Pegasus says, or he's just saving face, nothing wrong with what he said. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I didn't hear maybe I just didn't hear things right there. But I don't know. Is it a lot? I would just love clarity because I am genuinely curious if USC tried to get out of this game. Was it Lincoln Riley that wanted to get out of this game? Was it USC that wanted to get out of this game? I don't know. Either way, as Byron points out, LSU will come out on top regardless. Now, I do want to point out one more thing about one of LSU's big teams on their schedule this year. That is indeed UCLA. So UCLA is definitely a weird opponent. That's not an opponent you normally consider with LSU. I think we've had one recruiting battle with UCLA, Kenny Young, many moons ago. So we never really recruit against UCLA. But UCLA is on the schedule to finish out this home and home we scheduled with them a few years ago. Now, obviously, Chip Kelly destroyed us. But we got some good luck. Chip Kelly is no longer at UCLA, and UCLA made a very strange coaching hire, one that makes sense in terms of brand. Deshaun Foster, the former UCLA running back, coached at UCLA, took an NFL job, but then UCLA came calling to be his head coach. And this was the story of the day in all of college football. So if you've not seen this yet, you are in for a surprise.
Coach Foster, welcome to the Big Ten. We'll begin with your opening statement.
How you guys doing? I'm happy to be here. Glad to be a part of this great conference. Finally putting two great emblems together, UCLA and the Big Ten. We're a school that's won, 123 championships, so this fits us being right in this conference. Football-wise, we're just excited. I'm sure you guys don't know too much about UCLA, but our football program, but we're in LA. It's us and USC. We I'm just basically excited, really. That's it. Any questions?
Now, I have had my awkward moments speaking in front of people. Okay. Some very large crowds, some not so very large crowds. Let me first start off by saying that is a weird crowd to speak to, because you're not speaking to an audience. You're speaking to a media corps. All right. This is something that I would recommend everyone. If you ever speak in front of like a very subdued audience, like if they're eating lunch or something like that, or it's like an impartial crowd, don't ever start with "How are y'all guys doing?" It's cliche. No one's going to say anything. Just get right into it. Okay. The second thing is, if you didn't want to speak or BS in front of the media, just go for 10 seconds and just say, "Hey, any questions?" No speech in the history of time ever, never, ever, ever, ever has been criticized for being too long. Okay? Now, can you be too short with a speech? Maybe so, but most people don't care if you speak too short. But that was an awful look. And he did follow up, and he was asked in a media scrum, "Hey, you're going viral on Twitter for looking very awkward." And he said, "Well, it's not really my thing, and I get it. It doesn't mean that he's going to be a bad coach." But he said, "Hey, I played the game. I don't need to BS. It's not really my style." Folks. Half of being a head coach is kissing babies, shaking hands, and BSing. That's half of it. Half of it. All right? Think about college football coaching in a nutshell. When you recruit, do you think multimillionaire, six-figure earning men would be wanting to spend their time texting and DMing high school teenagers? No. Half of your college football job is BSing, speaking to people, speaking in front of people. That was awful. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to be a bad coach. That doesn't mean that, hey, it's okay to get nervous in front of people. Yeah, it's okay to be nervous. It's your first time being a head coach. Okay? But be prepared. Just say a few things, 30 seconds. "Hey, I'm excited about our team. Any questions?" But to then say, "Hey, I think, I played the game. I don't BS or whatever." I think it makes it sound like you're above that, and you're not above that. Part of being a head coach is doing pressers. Okay, part of it, and that lets me know that you didn't take the media training well. Today I went and listened to another interview you did, and as always, an interview in a one-on-one setting is always better than in a press conference scrum. He came off a lot more personal as the interview you did with George Wrightster. Okay, but that doesn't mean he's going to be good or bad. But that's not who I would have hired at UCLA. If I was an athletic director, I don't care if you played for the school or whatever, I do not hire coaches without play calling experience. That is something that I avoid unless I know for certain that I have a few things going in my favor. Right? I think Ed Orgeron is a different situation, right? I had a lot of things going in my favor. Ed Orgeron fit. It made sense. And Deshaun Foster might fit. But ultimately, it does seem and look like he is a coach who's in over his head. But we'll see when they come to Baton Rouge. We'll see. My major point is this. Whether or not you thought it was strange, whether or not you thought it was cool. I think some of you might find that it's cool. Like, hey, I'm not going to waste my time with all this BS. And that's what most media press conferences are. But in your first real like outside of the actual press conference in front of all your own media, not a good start. And then I would say this. I don't care if Chip Kelly was coaching this year with a very disgruntled mindset. The fact that he went to Ohio State right when that news broke, which once again was a little bit later than a lot of the other coaching news broke, I was like, holy hell. Our defense would not have to face a Chip Kelly coached offense. And that to me made me feel a lot more comfortable about the UCLA game. So you take a look at this offseason, and we knew going into this year that LSU would have another difficult season opener and that LSU would have to play 2 out-of-conference Power 5 games, which is one more losable game than you normally have to play. Well, you learn that USC really didn't want to play you, allegedly. And then you also learn that UCLA's program is in the tank. Okay? I am excited and rooting for Eric Bieniemy. I am. I want him to do well. But I just don't see it. Now, before we get to our guests, we'll take a few comments. Cole said, like Seinfeld said, 4 out of 5 people would rather be dead than have to public speak. Huh? What's up, Byron? Good to see you. Yes, Mike Leach. He never did opening statements. I sometimes think opening statements are just dumb. I will say an opening statement for the opening press conference kind of makes sense. And once again, there are a lot of you that I would say probably 90% of you like Brian Kelly and you feel he is taking LSU in the right trajectory. But even if you don't, the one thing you can say is he gives a good press conference. He says and does all the right things. Now, does that mean you're a good coach? No, because Jimbo would do that too. But coming up after this, we will talk to one of my favorite, and I mean favorite college football writers on the planet. We have done a gazillion radio segments. I've actually never seen his real life face. I'm serious. I'm super excited to see him. That's coming up right after this. Home is where the heart is, and our friends at NOPOD Roofing really takes that to heart. 504-810-8744. Give them a call today for all of your roofing needs. And one of my favorite things about NOPOD Roofing is their versatility. They not only do roofing, they do siding, they do painting, they do tree removal, fencing, anything home improvement. Our friends at NOPOD will get you straight. Give them a call today at 504-810-8744 and let them know PHL and Carter the Power sent you. We never overpromise and always over-deliver with NOPOD, baby. Let's go.
I think joy and happiness and doing things you like is important.
My favorite thing is sports cards. When I'm not on YouTube, I am building my collection. And when I started, I wish there was a sports card strategy show.
He wasn't necessarily going to be a first-round pick before all this Heisman buzz. Now they're talking about him being a top 5 pick.
Paul Hickey and the team at nooffseason.com personally helped build my Jaden Daniels collection, and they're looking to do the same for you. Just check them out on social media or nooffseason.com. you there. Now, we bring in our guest, Matt Zimick of Trojans Wire. Matt, what is the most obscure jersey that you own?
You know, I don't own a jersey. I own a number of caps. Like, I'm a Montreal Expos fan, so I have an Expos cap. But yeah, I don't buy jerseys. I just hasn't been a thing. Don't have really a deep budget. So yeah. I mean, if I had a budget, I mean, I probably would have gotten like a Greg Maddux 31 Braves jersey.
Okay.
Steve Young, John Stockton, they were some of my other favorite athletes from years gone by.
Yeah, so something else you don't know about Matt is he saw that I was wearing a blue polo. He actually went and changed to match with me. So I deeply appreciate that. Matt, your thoughts from Lincoln Riley today at Big Ten Media Days. Was there anything that stood out to you?
So the main takeaway, like if you're doing the headline story and you're trying to just organize the priority of stories, the big story is he's not scratching that NFL itch anytime soon. He wants to stay at USC for a few years, figure it out. Like he had a little bit of an edge. He said, like, we're playing catch up. We're playing catch up with Ohio State and Oregon. Now, you can take issue with that notion that USC is playing catch up or that USC should be playing catch up. Separate point is that Lincoln Riley really wants to get to the top of the Big Ten. Like he projected hunger, that he wants to figure this thing out, that he wants to be at USC. Football facilities are in the process of being finalized, but they aren't finalized yet. Obviously, the NIL situation has been a mess, but he didn't trash the NIL program. He said, we're playing catch up. That's how he chose to phrase it. General manager Dave Emmerich has come under fire from a lot of USC fans for losing the Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson commitments from Georgia in June. They came in late March, then they were out of the program 3 months later. Dave Emmerich, I think if you ask a lot of USC fans, he's the guy who lost those commitments along with the collective called the House of Victory. Lincoln Riley did not trash Emmerich. He didn't trash House of Victory. He said, I believe in the NIL program. I think we're going to figure this out. I think we're building momentum. I think the most honest aspect of Lincoln Riley's appearance at Media Days and what he said was, we have to have a good 2024 season. And specifically, recruits and their families need to know. They need to see from Eric Henderson, from Danton Lynn, from Matt Entz, from Doug Belk, from the defensive coordinator and the whole new defensive staff that he's hired. And obviously you at LSU, you hired a whole new defensive staff as well. So in that sense, the two programs are in the same boat. But Lincoln Riley acknowledged people need to see that we take defense seriously. People need to see that there's good NFL quality player development on defense, something which hasn't existed the previous few years. And Lincoln Riley said, if we can get that in place, then we can start landing the really big fish on defense. Then we can get a really complete roster. Then our program can be where it needs to be, where it should be. So I think that's the point that everyone can agree on. But in terms of, is Dave Emmerich as general manager really the right guy to lead the NIL efforts? And is USC really ready to go to the top of the Big Ten? Those are the things that we don't know. But Lincoln Riley wants to figure this thing out at USC. NFL rumors, they've come up. If a plum NFL job opens up, is Riley going to tire of the chase at USC in a conference that he didn't expect to be in when he joined in November of 2021? No, he wants to be at USC at least for the next 2-3 years to get this thing right. That's the main headline from Big Ten Media Days.
Yeah, I find it so interesting. I still think people, because it's kind of like in the past and all these other big college football stories have happened, but Riley and Brian Kelly going from Oklahoma and Notre Dame to LSU and USC, I still think that's still the biggest coaching story outside of Saban retiring. And I find it so interesting that this near exact same offseason having to replace defensive coaches. So, and they both have one Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. It is interesting. How do you feel USC fans feel about Lincoln Riley? Because LSU fans were so set on Lincoln Riley being the next coach. And then, of course, he USC was the actual destination. So how do you feel USC feels about Lincoln?
They're impatient and entering year 3 and seeing these losses. The Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson losses. Like, we thought we had a couple 5-star skull crushers on defense, and then they immediately leave. And like that just creates a sense of, hey, what's going on internally at USC? And obviously Lincoln Riley doesn't run NIL. That's not a coach's job description. But like, there's supposed to be that alignment, right? We talk about the word alignment, the administration, the coaching staff, the people in football operations, and it's not all aligned at USC. Like, we can agree on that. We can admit that there's something internally that's not quite there. And obviously, to a point, Lincoln Riley is responsible for this in the sense that, he should have fired Alex Grinch right after the Cotton Bowl against Tulane.
Yes.
He needed to get someone in there for year 2. Caleb Williams' final season at USC, he doubled down on Grinch, and he basically wasted a year of all of our lives. That's one thing. And he set the program back. So in that sense, Lincoln Riley is responsible for these things. But in terms of the minutia of NIL and how it operates and making sure players are getting their money and promises are being kept, like, Lincoln Riley needs other people to be doing that, and it doesn't seem as though the other people at USC tasked with doing that are doing that. And one thing has to be said about USC's new neighbor traveling along with the Trojans from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, Oregon. USC fans will say, well, it's just sugar daddy Phil Knight's money. No, it's not. If this was Phil Taggart, if this was Willie Taggart, or if this was Mark Helfrich coaching Oregon, would the Ducks be crushing it on the trail? No, they wouldn't. Like, so Dan Lanning has a lot to do with selling a vision. It's not just because Phil Knight has a ton of money. You have to have a competent coach, and you have to have competent people in the various administrative roles in terms of the architecture of a program. Oregon has all of that in alignment, and USC doesn't. So you can't just say it's Phil Knight's money. Now, does Phil Knight's money help? Of course it does. No one's denying that. But it's a whole structure. It's a whole operation. And Oregon and also Ohio State, they have that whole structure humming along, operating exactly the way it's supposed to, and USC is several steps behind. Now, you could say, and there's a pinch of honesty here from what Lincoln Riley's saying. There's a pinch of honesty in that, I inherited a program from Clay Helton. And so Lanning inherited a program from Mario Cristobal, which was, not a rock star, but there were pieces in place. The cupboard was not bare. Cristobal has recruited well wherever he's gone. He's still recruiting well at Miami. Whether he can coach him up, that's a different story. But, Lanning had some pieces to work with when he took over from Cristobal at Oregon. When Lincoln Riley came to Oklahoma, Bob Stoops still had a good program. It wasn't doing great, in 2014 when Stoops hired Riley as offensive coordinator, but it wasn't Clay Helton. It wasn't, really awful the way USC was in 2021. So in that sense, USC was a few steps lower than some of the other programs that the Trojans are trying to catch. But now that it's year 3, things should be at or close to a level where, USC's at a certain standard, and we enter year 3, not sure if USC can meet that standard. So, Lincoln Riley's trying to be optimistic, but I also think that he has to take ownership for the mistakes that he's made, which have set the program back and are, those decisions in the past, not so much what he's done in 2024, because the defensive hires all look great. The defensive coaching staff hires, they all look very promising. But past decisions, they have, caused these accumulated losses on the trail, in the transfer portal. They've done so much damage to Lincoln Riley's reputation that is really the deficit that he's trying to compensate for right now.
My longtime friend Matt Zimick, Trojans Wire, joining us. Blanche, one of our sharpest viewers, says he's been chatting with USC fans and they believe the talent is there to match LSU in most positions. The UCLA DC acquisition, Coach Lynn, is honestly scary. I am actually a huge fan of Coach Lynn and his stimulated pressure packages and all of that. So do you feel the same way going into this matchup?
Well, I'm sold on these defensive coaches, and of course, Danton Lynn is as defensive coordinator. He's going to get top billing, but also, Eric Henderson as defensive line coach. Who did he coach in the NFL the past several years? Aaron Donald. He was the Los Angeles Rams defensive line coach. The Rams D line was one of the best D lines in the NFL. So that dude can coach. All right, and so the fact that USC was tissue soft, Charmin soft under Alex Grinch, you now give USC not just a good X and O coordinator, a guy who whipped UCLA into shape in one season with Lynn, but also with Henderson and also with Matt Entz taking a demotion, being a multi-FCS national champion with the North Dakota State Dynasty. He's now willing to be a linebacker coach at a Power 5 or now Power 4.
I forgot about that. I actually totally forgot about that hire.
Yeah, so Lincoln Riley's gotten serious about defense, and this is really the thing about USC. People know that Lincoln Riley has disregarded defense in the past several years, and he has. Yeah. I don't deny that. But these defensive staff hires show that, he gets it now. He got the bucket of cold water. He got the dose of humility. Last year was Lincoln Riley's first college football regular season as a head coach in which he lost more than 2 games. So he's been consistently good. He's done a lot of winning, and having a really bad season, he got it. All right. Now he should have fired Alex Grinch a year earlier, of course, and that's still a huge mistake, but he got it. He got the point. And I think a lot of national commentators are in that doubting Thomas mode. I got to see USC play good defense. And I think the helpful distinction here, Carter, and I've just been thinking about it today, because one podcaster who, by the way, I used to work with at College Football News a decade ago, Barrett Salee. And I love Barrett. He and I were co-workers at College Football News way back in the day. So I love Barrett. But Barrett said on his recent podcast, Caleb Williams could be coming back, and I still wouldn't be rating USC highly because I don't think Lincoln Riley takes defense seriously. And that's even with the defensive hires. And I thought, it's not as though people don't see the defensive hires. I think they think that as long as Lincoln Riley is just managing the program, as long as he's at the top of that organizational pyramid, you're not going to get accountability. And I think that's the helpful difference. They can see that Lincoln Riley has made changes, trying to take defense more seriously, but they don't think there's going to be the accountability at the end of the process to ensure that USC becomes physical, that a Lincoln Riley team becomes physical, because Lincoln Riley teams have not been very physical. And so there's that doubt. And you know what? That's a fair critique, that USC has to just show it before we hand USC the benefit of the doubt, before we expect USC to be really good this season. So that's kind of the tricky part, that I think these defensive coaches are going to make USC's defense a lot better, and that will make the LSU matchup competitive, because the talent went so undeveloped. You could say underdeveloped as well. Either way, under Alex Grinch, I think that even though USC doesn't have a bunch of 5 stars on defense, just the talent that's there with these defensive coaches, it could be a lot better. You look at Iowa, for instance, Phil Parker, he will take 2 stars and 3 stars and he'll mold them into NFL guys. That is the hope at USC, that these defensive coaches, the Eric Hendersons, the Matt Entzes, the Doug Belks, also Taylor Mays, who coached USC's secondary in the Holiday Bowl, got a lot of improvement out of this unit in just 2 weeks. And he's on as an analyst. And of course, as you know, they now have lifted the restrictions on the number of coaches who can coach on the practice field and in the stadium. So Taylor Mays is now going to have more time with this USC secondary. So I think the pieces are in place for what's there to be developed. Now, the real question is what's there good enough? Does it have a good enough baseline to match what LSU's offense is going to bring to the table?
At Matt Zemek, a few more. You can follow him on Twitter right there, MattZemek. So this is obviously a pretty prevailing thought amongst the college football offensive nerds like myself. Do you believe the Miller Moss offense could be potentially as potent as a Caleb Williams offense, in a sense that he's actually going to run the play instead of Caleb, improvising, running 15 yards, Manziel-ing it up. Because look, Lincoln's had playmakers at the quarterback position. That's not what I'm saying. But there are some that feel that way. So give us your thoughts on that thought that Miller could actually be a better fit than Caleb.
I am sure that you at Power Hour LSU and a lot of LSU analysts and commentators have studied that Holiday Bowl film inside and out, looking for clues about the Lincoln Riley offense under Miller Moss. And the thing that obviously came through very clearly, Miller Moss is going to run the play. He's going to stick with the play. He's going to check it down if the route downfield isn't there. And like Caleb Williams did not throw the check down. He did not just make the short safe pass. He tried to improvise. He tried to do hero ball last year, as you've alluded to. The key for USC's offense, and if you're an LSU fan, I think you're looking at the main matchup in that September 1 game that we're all looking forward to. It's the LSU defensive line against the USC offensive line. I think that's where the game is going to be won and lost. Because USC's offensive line regressed last year. And for people who don't follow USC closely, Lincoln Riley inherited some real dudes in his first year, 2022. Andrew Voorhees, Brett Nealon, Bobby Haskins was their 2022 transfer pickup from Virginia. Those three guys were awesome, and they made the offensive line work. That's why Caleb won the Heisman Trophy. But then Voorhees and Nealon, they graduated, and the next year, their portal acquisitions, Michael Tarquin, Emmanuel Pregnon, and Pregnon, of course, is back this year, and Jarrett Kingston from Washington State. The portal pickups did not do well. The departing guys left some holes, and so the offensive line that were still within the program that came back last year, they weren't up to it. So it was clear that Voorhees and Nealon were really carrying the load for the offensive line in 2022. They leave the picture in 2023, and the offensive line was a lot worse. So to me, Carter, this brings up the main tension point for USC. I'm sold on the defensive coaches, right? I've already established that. The key guy for this program is Josh Henson, the offensive line coach, because it's year 3. It's year 3. He inherited some real rock stars in year 1 who made things work for him. Year 2, with the guys he had in the program, he did not do a good job. So year 3 is going to prove us whether Josh Henson, whom LSU fans will recognize, he was formerly at Texas A&M in the SEC. This is the prove-it year for Josh Henson. And I might also add for strength coach Benny Wiley, who joined Riley in going from Oklahoma to USC. This is the prove-it year for both of those guys. Is USC a truly muscular team with Benny Wiley still around as strength coach and with Josh Henson as offensive line coach? If those two guys do a great job this year, it's going to work for USC. And if those two guys don't do a great job, the whole house of cards could come crashing down. Those are really the two main tension points for USC this year, as I see it, in terms of the people whose jobs and whose reputations in this industry are most squarely on the line.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Josh Henson at Texas A&M, he was actually on the LSU staff in those early Les Miles years. It's the second consecutive year LSU is playing an assistant from the Miles era. Last year was Florida State special teams coach, started on this Miles staff. And Josh Henson, at A&M, they loved him. I mean, he fielded pretty solid units. So yeah, it is under a lot of pressure. And a lot of people have it flipped, actually. The big thing that they're looking for is, LSU with 2 first-round offensive tackles, more than likely in next year's draft, going up against, Bear Alexander and that USC the defensive line is very interesting. One player I love is Woody Marks. And I thought that was just so random that he transferred to USC. Second consecutive year, Riley gets a running back from the SEC to be the guy. How do you feel about the supporting cast? Because the skill guys at USC, as always is the case with Riley, that looks to be pretty special.
Well, in terms of the skill guys at USC, it's an interesting discussion because like USC grows wide receivers on trees, much as LSU does. Like these two schools, USC and LSU, like elite wide receivers, they have just cranked them out like nobody's business. But with that said, last year was not actually a great year for USC receivers. Mario Williams, the transfer from Oklahoma, he was in Jordan Addison's shadow in 2022. So he was supposed to step forward last year. Didn't happen. And they made a big portal pickup of Dorian Singer from Arizona. And 2 years ago in 2022, USC and Arizona got into a shootout. I think the final score was 45-37. Singer made all sorts of circus catches. And Caleb Williams was reported to have said either during or after the game, hey, can we get him? And they got him in the portal. And yet he was a total bust. And
wow.
The commentary on Singer was that, okay, he can catch 50-50 balls. Like that was his selling point. But the problem was he couldn't get open, and right. Caleb was unwilling to throw 50-50 balls. He wanted to be throwing into open windows because he wanted to be showing something to the NFL. Like throwing a 50-50 ball, that's not going to impress NFL scouts. So USC's receivers did not come together last year. Taj Washington was a really good receiver, and he's now in the NFL with the Dolphins. Brendan Rice was also decent, but really no superstar, and you didn't have a whole lot of quality depth. So there is the feeling, and if you watch the Holiday Bowl film, you'll see this, that Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon, the younger crew, and it's interesting, like the younger receivers, they got a lot of reps with Miller Moss in practice last season. They weren't really doing a lot with Caleb Williams as the ones. Caleb Williams was working with Dorian Singer, Mario Williams, Taj Washington. So there is the feeling at USC that not only are these younger receivers good, but they have a good rapport, natural instinctive connection with Miller Moss. So like that part of it, I think is going to work. It's all about the offensive line giving Miller Moss the time to make the reads, to make the throws that he needs to make. That's the hinge.
So it's those two guys, Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, and they're all still, that looks to be a pretty loaded group.
It is a loaded group. And, Zachariah Branch, his main contribution last year was as a kick returner. And it's going to be a question. It's going to be a real question to see. Okay, can he, like we know he's a speed demon, but can he run the precise routes, and offer some precision and discipline and attention to detail as a route runner? That's going to be the important thing. But I think that the two guys that are expected to deliver are Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon. Like Kamari Ramsey at Big Ten Media Days, he said, like the two guys that I think people are sleeping on are Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon. So, like, I think USC's receivers are the real deal. But it's going to be, can the offensive line give Miller Moss time for everything to come together?
So we get these portal additions. Obviously, USC secondary was a discussion last year. You bring in some solid safety transfers. Defensively, obviously LSU's offense is in many ways loaded. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty as well, but this is a really, really good unit. Do you feel more comfortable from USC's perspective defensively? We talked about Coach Lynn, but their defensive personnel holding up against Will Campbell and the LSU offense.
I feel really good about the secondary.
Interesting.
And it's partly because of the transfers that they got that you showed there on the screen. And Danton Lynn's gotten a couple guys from his UCLA secondary. He's been able to import them to USC. So like he doesn't have to do extra coaching with them. Like they already know his system. But here's another thing that's overlooked in the discussion about how good USC's secondary is going to be. Not so much the defense, though that's kind of a part of it, but the secondary in particular. Dante Williams, you know that he's now at Georgia on Kirby Smart's staff to provide recruiting help. And USC fans, a lot of USC fans really liked the fact that Lincoln Riley retained Dante Williams on staff. Williams, of course, was the interim after Clay Helton got fired in 2021. And a lot of USC fans liked Dante Williams just because, he was an ace recruiter. He had the connections, he had the savvy in terms of being able to close the sale on recruitments. But what became apparent, and I was banging this drum earlier than most, is that he can't coach his way out of a wet paper bag. That Dante Williams created a very soft, very unresponsive USC secondary last year. It wasn't just that they were bad, they were soft. 10, 12 yards off the line of scrimmage, just ceding real estate, just not being contentious, not being aggressive, not challenging the ball. And so I alluded earlier, Taylor Mays was an analyst last season. Then when Dante Williams left for Georgia, Taylor Mays becomes the de facto secondary coach on an interim basis for the Holiday Bowl. And you saw USC's secondary improve by leaps and bounds. So it's not just because Taylor Mays is there, but though that obviously helps, but just losing Dante Williams is addition by subtraction. And we are going to see this year just how much addition by subtraction that actually is. And then you add, of course, Doug Belk, who, he's learned under Nick Saban, very experienced. He comes across as a very clear, lucid communicator. So Dante Williams being out could be just as big a factor as Taylor Mays and Doug Belk actually being there to help the USC secondary. So I like the way USC matches up in the back. But my main concern, and we have to address this, right? The defensive line. And it's not just that LSU has an elite offensive line. I've read all the press clippings from SEC media days. Brian Kelly loves the offensive line. Garrett Nussmeier loves the offensive line. Everybody at LSU loves the offensive line, as well they should. And defensive line is where USC is thin. You have Bear Alexander, he's good. You have Anthony Lucas, he could be good with Eric Henderson now coaching him up instead of the previous defensive line coaches. Like, there are a couple guys who could be good, but depth, we do not have depth. that is going to be the raging concern. And so in week 1 against LSU, if one guy drops, if one guy gets hurt, if one guy gets cramps, like that could be it. That could be the whole shebang. And so defensive line depth is really the ultimate weakness on this USC roster. And that's where LSU has to feel really confident about its chances.
Oh, man. I could see Will Campbell and Emory Jones watching this, licking their chops, getting ready to run some inside zone and outside zone, mix it all in.
Absolutely.
LSU sitting at a 6.5-point favorite. Total was at 66.5. It has dropped down to 62.5. Interesting stat about LSU and USC. In the Riley and Kelly tenure, USC number 1 in all of college football when it comes to overs. LSU number 3 in all of college football when it comes to overs, which makes sense, right? Bad defensive coordinator and Heisman Trophy, quarterback play, over the 4 years. For some reason, I am feeling that this game isn't going to be as shootouty as some people think. Do you have a lean, or is there something that's just like itching at you as far as how you think this game will play out?
Okay, the total is 62.5.
It opened at 66.5 and got down to 62.5.
I'm thinking that with LSU's offensive line advantage and with the matchup between USC's receivers and LSU's very uncertain secondary, I would take the over. I would certainly take the over at this point. And but also 6.5. I think LSU is probably the better team, but 6.5. Like, I would, if I was setting the line, I'd say LSU minus 3.5. And then the Toviano suspension. I don't know how much you think that's going to matter or could matter, but boy, after the year LSU secondary had in 2023, I think the USC receivers are in a decent position, provided that Miller Moss gets enough time, gets enough protection in the pocket. So, I'm expecting a close game, and I think 6.5 seems a little bit generous to LSU given all the issues that the Tigers have to address. Now, obviously, USC has its issues, which I've enumerated, and the defensive line depth is really the 5-alarm fire for the Trojans. But nevertheless, I do think the 6.5 is just giving LSU a little bit too much benefit of the doubt. If this was a game in Atlanta as opposed to Las Vegas, okay, maybe that would move the needle a little bit. But, so USC is going to be well represented. I'm not saying it's going to dominate the building. I'm sure LSU is going to travel really well for this game, but it's going to be neutral, I would say. I would say, I would be setting it at like 3.5, and I'd be setting the total at, I'd say 70.5.
70.5. That is absolutely vicious. Which would be crazy. Like if someone just like plopped in and didn't know anything about college football, knowing that these are the first two starts for these QBs outside of bowl games, it's a 70.5 total. It is
That's
absolutely
a lot of variables. That's true.
It's insane. It's interesting. So a while back, you had me on to discuss 03 USC, 03 LSU. You've researched this actually way more than I did, and you knew more about 03 LSU than I knew about 03 USC. And you're a historian, also. Or I know you don't like to be called a historian, but you love looking into the past and all of that. What do you think would have happened in that game?
Well, I'm a USC blogger, and of course, I would have loved to have seen that game happen, and I would have loved to have seen USC win. I mean, obviously, I wasn't managing any USC blog site, but I'm a Pete Carroll guy. I'm ride or die with Pete Carroll.
Yeah, okay.
I love him. He's one of my favorite people in sports. But being honest, okay, it was in the Superdome, and that probably would have moved the needle to LSU. Like that would have been just a challenge that USC might not have been able to fully answer, because LSU
but let's say the game is played in Phoenix or
so that's the interesting part. What if the game wasn't in the Superdome? Like that, to me, that would change my view. But if we were going to play the 2004 Sugar Bowl, USC LSU instead of USC Oklahoma, Superdome would have been tough. But yeah, if we could, so in other words, you're asking me to just evaluate it on the merits. If all other things are equal, yeah. I think it would have been a rock fight. I think it would have been a very low scoring game. Part of this is that we need to remember, and when you came on my show a few years ago to talk about 2003, we really unearthed that point. It really became apparent to both of us how different college football offense was. We really hadn't seen the revolution take root yet. We hadn't seen Rich Rodriguez and what he did with Pat White. We hadn't seen Chip Kelly and what he did with Oregon. We really hadn't seen college football offenses take off in terms of the modern effect with the RPOs, the spread concepts, all that stuff. So back in 2003, January 2004, it probably would have been a rock fight because these guys had bone crushers up front. They had very fast, supremely skilled guys in the back in the secondaries, whether it was William Gay for LSU or, for the guys that USC was able to bring the table. So I just see so many studs on the defensive side of the ball for these two programs. And Matt Leinart and what he had, was certainly good, but USC didn't exactly go great guns against Michigan in the Rose Bowl. Scored just 28 points. Didn't really blow the top off Michigan. I mean, USC was the better team, but that was much more about the defense absolutely smothering Michigan than the offense rolling. And it was very similar for LSU in the Sugar Bowl against Oklahoma. Just the defense put on an absolute clinic. So I think that the USC defense and the LSU defense, it would have been a game for the defenses. So something in the area of 17-14, 17-13. You could pretty much flip a coin. I don't think one team would have a really pronounced edge. It would probably come down to the team that made the really big mistake. Now, USC, I would say, had the edge at quarterback. So you could give the Trojans a slight edge there. But, LSU could have, obviously forced a fumble, done something special on defense. So really, coin flip, if it's at a true neutral location, LSU by 3 to 6 points if the game's in the Superdome. Okay.
I can deal with that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, with the playoff, it is what it is now. You obviously cover all of college football. Some new things, obviously, scholarship limitations and all of that. Like football 105 now. I like that baseball is going up. You love college sports more than practically anyone I know. Your thoughts on all the changes? What's really sticking out to you that people aren't really talking a whole lot about? And if you still love college sports the same as you once did?
I think the thing that we need to see, and people might complain about NIL, the transfer portal, all these things, and I don't think those criticisms are unreasonable. I think like it's logical for a fan to look at all this and say, this is not what I grew up watching. This is not what I grew up loving. The romance doesn't feel the same. The tradition doesn't seem to be honored or rewarded. Like following recruiting isn't really fun anymore because a commitment doesn't really mean anything. It lasts a few minutes, and then a little note, just a small note before I get back to the bigger picture. We shouldn't have guys visiting under schools while they're committed to other schools. Like that just seems stupid, right? You visit everyone you want to visit, and then you make a commitment, and that's it. We should be doing that. It's just right now it's so stupid. So fans are right to be angry. I'm not gonna rain on fans' parade here. They're right to be angry. But I think what we need to see in all of this, and we could talk about specific reforms here and there, but I'd just like to see transparency. I would like to see transparency and transparency connected to, what, everyone's playing by the same rules. And when we think about it, isn't that really the problem with college football and college sports writ large, that some schools are doing things in a way that's different from others? The way that Alabama might pass the bag around, it might manipulate behind the scenes. I mean, going back to Bear Bryant, like it's not just a Nick Saban thing, like going back 50 years. Some schools are playing by different rules than others. Can we just, whatever the rules are, can we have everyone playing the same way? And like what I'm really getting to there is like there should be a standard rate for an offensive tackle in terms of NIL. There should be a standard rate.
Yeah, you just want
and whether you call that a salary cap or a budget, whatever, there should be transparency here, because we can't just have one school dropping, like Miami has like $1 billion donor, much as Oregon does with Phil Knight. The idea that, we can just drop a huge bag and get our prospects. No, like there should be some regulation, and there should be a sense that everyone's playing by the same rules. And if you're a prospect, like you can get a certain amount, and more power to you. Like I want these athletes to cash in on their talent, but can we have some standardization? Can we have some just, this is the number for this position, starter, backup, and at the front door when you enter a school versus after your first season? What about incentives, NIL incentives for number of starts? Do you make the All-America team? And I generally think that we should be really restricting what schools are able to give in the front door, and we should be loading up NIL as an incentive vehicle where, if you're an All-American, first team, second team, it's like the NBA. If you get like one of the top 3 teams, you're in line for like a Supermax deal or, those other stipulations in your contracts.
Yeah.
That's what we should have. Much more incentive-based, much more on what you do after you enter the school than up front. And so a lot of things to work through, but that's my main thing.
Yeah, I think if you did that, though, I mean, there would still be other ways to be on top of that. But I do tend to agree with you. Like, if you were to say this is the rate, you would just because people would bend around laws doesn't mean you shouldn't enforce them. Basically,
yes.
Right? So, like, I agree with you. I had this debate in a very lively discussion with Andy Staples a few months ago, and highly recommend people go watch it if you want to. I won't go into it. We did ponder if it would benefit everyone if we knew what every single player made on the team. And I put up like the moral compasses of the ethics of that, because I could see Joe Schmo saying, well, whatever the player's name is, he's making $300K. He should be making, it would make it a little bit more visceral, some of the hatred that some of these players made. But I still think it would be awesome to know, right? If it was just out there what you were getting.
I mean, and if you're donating to a collective, shouldn't you know how much
Shouldn't
each
you know?
player is
Yeah.
getting? Like
Exactly.
that just seems obvious to me. Like sunlight is the best disinfectant, right?
I've never heard that before. Wait, what? Sunlight
Well,
is
now
the
you
best-
have. Now you
what
have
kind
transparency.
of
Yes.
what kind of West Coast?
I don't think
state-
it's a West Coast thing, but
I've
anyway.
never heard that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Matt, we'll probably have you on again before the big game. I wanted people to get accustomed to USC as we look towards the next season. Your backdrop's interesting, though. I mean, that's you are a very Christian man. I
am a Christian. That my mom loves to put beautiful visual images on the wall of her dining room.
Yeah, I like it. So this cross over here looks like a cross that my grandmother in New Roads has. Okay, so I like the metal one, but this wooden one is creative. I like that. It's beautiful.
There's a lot of variety, but like a lot of the LSU fan base, I grew up Catholic, and
Oh, really? Okay,
it's important. Yeah, it's important.
There we go. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate you. Your college football bold prediction for next year is what?
For USC, for
Or just
nationally.
Matt.
Well,
I appreciate your college football mind. I let you spit whatever thing you wanted to get off your tongue to my audience as far as college football.
So this week is Big Ten Media Days, so I'm going to be safe here. Ohio State versus Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. In terms of the playoff, I don't have a really strong answer because I'm not sold on Georgia. I think that Georgia had something really special in 2021 and then 2022. And took a step back last year. So, maybe Georgia's motivation is what helps the Dogs this year. But I think I need to see more from their offense this season. So I don't. And Kalen DeBoer replacing Saban in Alabama. I think this season brings a lot of questions. And let's just stop ourselves and realize how many people had Michigan versus Washington in the title game before last year. So I would say that, we've escaped that Alabama Clemson black hole where it seemed as though those two programs had the death grip on the sport. We're back in a place of parity. I think that's a kind of a fundamental big picture overview of the sport. And that's good. That is good. And I think the 12-team playoff is going to be, provide more seats at the table and for all the problems that exist in the sport. And there are a ton. And we've talked about a few. 12-team playoff, more chances to compare teams on a championship stage. That is undeniably good for the sport.
No, come on, Matt. Please. God, dog.
Come on, Boise State. Boise State having a place at the table. That's good.
Yeah, Jared Zabransky would have been crushed.
He beat Oklahoma, though.
Oh.
And that wasn't an amazing Oklahoma team, but still, it was magic. Right. You had to admit, it was magic.
They had Adrian Peterson and a bowl of dust. That is they didn't put the names on the back of the Oklahoma players' jerseys in. Jared Zabransky and Ian Johnson would have been destroyed. Statue of Liberty, hook and ladder my ass.
You know what? Tulane beat USC. Tulane beat USC in the Cotton Bowl when it got its chance.
Yes, but it took you guys having the worst, softest defense in the history. You made Matt House look like Bill Belichick in that freaking game. I mean, goodness gracious. But
well, you know what, Carter? I don't know what your time constraint is, but
go ahead. We'll let you go ahead.
Okay. Well, let's just talk about the playoffs and postseason worthiness and those kinds of questions. Here's something college football definitely needs to do in the 12-team playoff era, and that is for the conference championship games. All right. So think about it. Let's just say hypothetically Georgia and Alabama are both 12-0, or like one's 12-0 and one's 11-1. They're both getting in, right? There's no doubt that they're both getting in the 12-team playoff. So why do you have them play each other in the SEC championship game? So my proposal is, in order to keep these conference championship games relevant, like the rights holders keep the rights, and you still have a game in Atlanta in early December. You still have a game in Indianapolis for the Big Ten in early December, et cetera, ACC in Charlotte. You keep all those games. You keep the television rights. But if you have a very clear situation where your top team or your top two teams, they're definitely in the playoff, that conference championship game should become a conference play-in game. Let's imagine you have 10-2 Ole Miss and 10-2 Missouri, or 10-2 LSU, both on that fence. You have those two teams play in Atlanta in early December as the 13th game. Winner gets in, loser goes out, makes for great TV. It's a more significant game than having Alabama play Georgia when they're both already in. College football needs to change the conference championship games in that way, with a flex plan that allow those games should become stages for the teams on the fence, not the teams that are guaranteed to get into the playoff. Like that, why you're making athletes play an extra game for no reason if you just keep having the top teams. These should be play-in games across the different conferences. And it could be that you only have one team from the SEC that's on the fence, like three are definitely in, and that fourth team you're not sure. So maybe Ole Miss 10-2 against 10-2 Penn State in the Big Ten. They're both on the fence. Penn State plays Ole Miss in Atlanta, just like last year, although last year was the Peach Bowl. But this year you do it as a play-in game for the 12-team playoff. Like, obviously, you're getting a better game, better TV drama, better everything. College football definitely needs to do that with the conference championship games.
I like that. I haven't thought about that. Well, Matt Zimick, follow him at Matt Zimick and at Trojans Wire. We'll talk to you soon, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carter. You're the man.
All right, buddy. That's him. Matt Zimick, also a tennis expert. If you are a tennis fan, make sure you check him out. Obviously, Carlos Alcaraz, the new superstar of the tennis world. I will give BT this. He had been telling us for months that Makai Lemon is the guy for USC that we need to look out for. I'm very familiar with Zachariah Branch because he was teammates of Jeremiah Hughes, and I watched a lot of Hughes in my evaluation of him. And he's not at LSU anymore, Hughes, but it's very interesting. BT says 04 USC is the best college football team ever. You can make you can't make a case. They're not beating 2019 LSU, but you can make a case that they were more complete. But if you want to, especially if you want to take out like these modern day SEC teams, because the offenses were so different. The game is just so different then. But I would say if you era adjust this, all right, the USC of that era, the 03, 04, 05 USC was just as big as 2019 LSU in terms of celebrity and influence. I mean, I know of LSU football players who idolize Reggie Bush, right? Everybody wanted to be Reggie Bush. Everyone. Like, Reggie Bush was Tyrann Mathieu before Tyrann Mathieu in terms of cultural relevance and who everyone wanted to be. Every DB wants to be Tyrann Mathieu. Every running back wanted to be Reggie Bush. Any running back that played from, early or late 2000s to like 2018 or whatever, they wanted to be Reggie Bush. He's a GOAT. Reggie Bush is the best running back, college running back I've ever seen. There's a few others that are up there, but he's the best. Okay. There are a lot of like national college football things that I want to get to, but that'll be for tomorrow. We only go for 1 hour on Wednesdays, but because we had a guest in the next 5 or so minutes, I'll answer as many questions as we possibly can. Once again, Jonah Williams, a lot of steam going in LSU's favor, the 5-star safety, who is a 2-sport athlete. And obviously, if you play baseball, LSU is where you want to play baseball. So let's go to Jared. His super chat. I'm kind of torn about the public knowing what the kids are paid. There's a reason you don't talk money with your teammates or coworkers. Yeah, and once again, it's out of all college football things that has happened and been discussed, that's the one I have been the most torn on. It's not if the players should be paid. It's should there be a ledger of what we know they are getting paid. And the issue is we know ballparks. Like I know of a ballpark LSU has paid some of these 2025 recruits. So it's weird. It's very weird. But there's no official way of knowing it. And with different NIL deals and stuff like that, there's paperwork and all of that goes into it. Whose secondary gives up more yards week 1? Man, I would probably say LSU's at this point because I think USC, based on what Matt said, LSU's not even going to need to throw the football. The way Matt talked about the USC defensive line is very interesting. USC secondary should be pretty good. They brought in some good portal safeties. So, yeah, it's interesting. I'll save the scholarship chat for tomorrow. 'Cause that's something, obviously, as many of you know, I'm very passionate about. I'm with you, Jared. I do think LSU wins in week 1. I do. I feel better about week 1 than either of the Florida State games. I do. But that doesn't mean I don't think USC isn't going to be great under any circumstance. I do think it's also kind of strange. The way the college football playoff is kind of set up in terms of like its dates. And he did bring up a very interesting suggestion for the changing up the college football championship games. Let's see here. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more Jonah Williams. We will have a guest, an LSU baseball guest tomorrow. He will be able to break it down. So Blake will be on with us tomorrow. And he's probably my favorite. And there's other guys that cover LSU baseball really well. Blake and I mostly talk football privately, but we do talk a lot of baseball. And he knows way more about that than I do. Yes, Eric Bieniemy at UCLA now. Man, I'm telling you. I think UCLA could be very bad next year. I think it'd be very, very, very bad. So, and I felt that way before today. Let me see. God, man. So I got to book my Vegas travel. Oh boy, I'm not going to enjoy that. That'll be it for me. So, don't forget this Saturday, show up wearing a jersey. You get in free the most obscure jersey, autographed Grant Delpit card from yours truly. So come on by. PHL will be set up this Saturday. Now, once again, it's on a Sunday as well. I don't know if I'm going to set up on Sunday, but I will for sure be there, set up with my own little table, 735 American Way in Shreveport, Louisiana. Well, as if there was another Shreveport. It is Power Hour. LSU. Boom. Shout out to NOPOD. Shout out to our friends at offseason.com. Shout out to Blanche and J Red, our top super chatters of the evening. Tonight, we're doing brown sugar pork chops. Let's go.